One more time, as Daft Punk might say, we are here in Kirkby at the AXA Training Centre to hear Arne Slot speak ahead of the final Premier League game of the season against Crystal Palace. Now, Crystal Palace wasn't particularly on the agenda that much. More will talk about Mo Salah winning the Ballon d'Or, talk about Trent Alexander-Arnold and what he should expect and what we should expect from him on this final day of the season. Also, a few more revelations about some of the trials and tribulations the two men have had over the course of the season, something for Xabi Alonso to think about. I asked him about Szoboszlai and you get to hear that answer and everything else. I will break it down as usual. You know when, you know where, back in the lab. Here we are again, back in the lab one final time this season to pick the bones out of everything Arne Slot had to say in his pre-match press conference. Now, I mentioned previously there was a bit of a end-of-term feel to the presser today. Lots of relaxation, lots of laughter from Slot and from everybody in the room. But I must admit, for me, it was tinged with just a little bit of sadness as well, that it was going to be my last time at Kirkby for this season. I've enjoyed so much covering this team and getting to go into press conferences and really picking the brain of Arne Slot and coming up with ideas for things that I could ask him. And the fact that this could be the last time I get to do it for a few months at least, that was quite sad to me. But don't worry, I got over myself. There was still plenty of fun stuff to be dissecting today. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Starting with team news. Now, Slot mentioned something rather interesting regarding Joe Gomez, who's the real only injury issue the Liverpool have had these last few weeks. He was on the bench for the game against Brighton, but it turns out that he wasn't actually fit to play. He was still just a little bit further away from being at freak fitness to be able to come onto the pitch. But Slot wanted to give him, he called it a ceremonial, I call it a ceremonial place on the bench, because he wanted to mark all of the good things that Joe has done off the pitch, also to mark the hard work that he's put in to get back to where he is, to be able to be featuring in a matchday squad before the end of the season. Now, the good news is that he has come a little bit further along that line of rehab and recovery, so the chances are if he was called upon to come onto the pitch, even for a few minutes against Crystal Palace, he would be fit enough. So there's a high chance that we will see him there, which is good news. But it's time for my top takeaways. And top takeaway number one, Slot has laid down the gauntlet. Now, one of the things he was asked about what it takes for Liverpool to win again and again and again. I think the comparison was made to the Liverpool team of the 80s, who at one stage won 8 out of 10 league titles. And we've seen in recent years in the Premier League, obviously Manchester City have won back-to-back titles. Manchester United were able to do it in the 90s and noughties. Even the likes of Chelsea were able to do it under Mourinho. They won back-to-back league titles. That is something that Liverpool haven't done since 1984. They haven't successfully defended a league title since 1984, which is a ridiculous stat when you think about it. Now, so Slot was asked about what it took to do that, and he once again praised the professionalism of the players and the mentality of the players he has in his squad. But he did also give them a challenge, and he said that he wouldn't know if they were ready to be serial winners until he gets them back for pre-season training on the 8th of July. Now, I found this kind of fascinating, particularly in light of what we've seen in the last week to 10 days of Liverpool celebrating, Liverpool going to Dubai, Slot going to Ibiza, all of those kind of things where they've been able to celebrate and enjoy the success that they have created within this group. And some people haven't liked the fact that they've been doing it during the season. Some people have felt like it's unprofessional. I say some people, it's Roy Keane. Roy Keane is the one who's got to be in his bonnet about it. But I don't think that the rest of Liverpool fan base or even media pack have had any issue with it. I mentioned last week why I felt like this was a very good time for Liverpool to go and get all that out of their system. And out of their system is exactly what Slot wants it to be. Because when it comes to starting the season again, you have to be ready. When it comes to 8th of July, you have to be ready for business. Now, that means that they can enjoy themselves over the summer break a little bit, but they need to be ready to go from day one of pre-season training. Pre-season is such an important part of every team's development that Slot will be able to look into his players' eyes, maybe even look into their bellies, and he will know exactly whether or not this team are fit and ready and hungry enough to go out and win the Premier League title again. And you know what? I wouldn't put it past them. Now, this leads very nicely into top takeaway number 2. Liverpool won the league last summer. Now, this is another mention of pre-season and the way that everybody set their stall out last summer. Now, Slot mentioned the fact that Mo Salah came back early, and in terms of fitness, he was very much at his peak, very early, ready to go. He had that hunger and desire to prove himself after what was a very disappointing end to the season before. However, as those of us who have seen his Salah's interview with Gary Neville will also know, the Slot had to pull him up a little bit on his attitude in those training sessions. Some of the stuff that wasn't happening, some of his lackadaisical nature in and around those training sessions. And Slot had to kind of challenge him to say, look, there are other people who are looking to you to be the leader. They are following your example. We have an example of the great Mo Salah, the perfect Mo Salah, the Mo Salah who can go out there and win titles and win Player of the Year awards. And then you have this guy who's kind of meandering around, not really putting the effort in. I want to see more of him than see of him. Now, that's a very, very bold thing for a new manager to say coming in to his main superstar. And it turns out he wasn't the only person he said it to. Slot revealed in the press conference today that he also had a very similar conversation with Trent Alexander-Arnold around his attitude in training. The way that he framed it was he's doing Xabi Alonso a favour, which I thought was hilarious, and everybody else in the room was, because it's like, you know what? He's clearly still got that in him. But he might have to deal with that as well. So here you are, Xabi. Here's an early indicator of what you might well have on your hands. But we also have to remember that these were two players who, as far as we are aware, hadn't made up their mind over whether they were going to sign new contracts for Liverpool or not. These were still players who were very much assessing Arne Slot, just like he was assessing them. And yet Slot felt that he wasn't afraid to lay down the gauntlet to these big, big players and tell them what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable. And you know what? They all fell in line. And them falling in line that early was not only down to the fact that they could see his methods were working, but also the fact that when you've got someone who is as dominant as Jurgen Klopp coming in, it's important that the next person has a strength of personality, to not feel like they have to go and do Jurgen Klopp things, but to be their own person. And I think that that was a really important sign that he showed. And the fact that these players were able to step up and, as I say, fall in line straight away, that really did lay down the foundations for what we saw over the course of the rest of the season, and the way that this Liverpool team fell in line, banded together, and really embraced everything that Arne Slot was telling them. And then look what happened. It brought them to a Premier League title. Top takeaway number 3, Liverpool aren't on the beach just yet. Now, I mentioned those celebrations in the earlier part of the show, and those come into focus on this part as well. Slot was asked about the results that Liverpool have had since clinching the league, and yes, there haven't been 2 defeats and 1 draw, 1 point from 9, but he insisted that there were some good things that he saw in those games. Obviously, conceding 8 goals in 3 games is not Liverpool standard, and that's where he believes that they have fallen short, but not by a massive amount. The way that he tells it, it's a few small percentage points here, maybe not blocking across, maybe not throwing yourself in front of a shot in the same way, that have been the difference between not conceding goals and conceding goals, particularly when you're playing teams who are still fighting for things, like the way Chelsea and Brighton were. Arsenal not so much, but these are all still good football teams. And against good football teams, if you make small percentage choice mistakes, then they are going to punish you. But what I thought was most interesting about this was the way that Slot was adamant that there was no drop-off in work rate. Now, these are things that we talk about: sprints, we talk about distance covered, we talk about running, we talk about effort. These are the things that are important for any football team who wants to consider themselves elite. Now, these are also the things that we and the wider football world has said that Liverpool haven't really been doing. It's interesting the way that Liverpool fans themselves have kind of revelled in this idea of Liverpool being on the piss and not really caring, and using that as a kind of a defence mechanism against these results by saying, these results doesn't matter. Look, I look at them, they're not even putting it in, all that kind of stuff. Slot didn't want to hear any of that. Didn't want anybody to believe that his players weren't being professional, Mr. Keane. He wanted everybody to know that they were still putting in just as much effort as they had been previously. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One, as I mentioned before, I think that he wanted to pay respects to the quality of the opponents Liverpool faced in his last 3 games. And you have to hold your hands up, particularly Arsenal in the second half. I do think Brighton at times on Monday, and even Chelsea, they showed why they are teams to be feared. And once again, the strength of this league, the fact that everybody can give you trouble if you drop your percentage points just a few. The other reason why I feel like he reiterated this, because he didn't want anyone to believe that this trend would continue into the last game. He wanted everybody to know that there will be no slacking off on Sunday against Crystal Palace. And this is something which I believe the players have already alluded to. It was notable to me on the pitch after the game against Spurs when the title was clinched. The only game that Andy Robertson mentioned when interviewed was the Crystal Palace game. He didn't talk about winning against Chelsea. He didn't talk about winning against the title rivals Arsenal. He mentioned Crystal Palace. The day you get your hands on that Premier League trophy, you want to win. You want to prove to everybody exactly why you're champions. So I would not be surprised to see Liverpool's best performance of this little 4-game stint to happen on Sunday in front of the fans. And it does help the fact that Crystal Palace are kind of having their own little fiesta after having won the FA Cup. So maybe aren't going to be putting in a massive amount of resistance themselves. But as I say, do not be surprised to see Liverpool putting in a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of quality into this game against Crystal Palace on Sunday. Now it's time for me to ask my final question of the season to Arne Slot, and this time it was about Dom being a little bit deeper.
Hi Arne, we saw against Brighton Dom Szoboszlai was playing a little bit deeper as a number 8, and you mentioned before the game that he actually sees this as one of his favourite positions. I wondered, had you had that conversation across the season with you about giving him a chance in that position, and how do you feel like he did?
No, as many players did, we as a team played a good game. Unfortunately, Brighton played a very good game as well. So it was a close call. I think he had a great pass towards Mo, which was the lead up to the first goal. He played a good game. Nothing new to see. Just interesting more to see the dynamic on the midfield with Harvey, Dom, and Ryan in behind him. If he wants to play in that position, he is in big competition, because I'm also an admirer of McAllister. So, but also of Dom, by the way. It was interesting to see, but not much more than that.
Now, the reason I asked this question was because when Slot did reveal before the game that Dom Szoboszlai had told him that he felt like this was his better position, it did kind of put my ears up a bit, because we have seen at various points in his Liverpool career suggestions that maybe this is where he will end up. I do always remember the game against Wolves in his first season where McAllister comes off at half-time and him and Curtis Jones form the double pivot and play really, really well. You makes me think that maybe he has the skills to be able to do that. I believe when he's playing for Hungary, there's quite a few times when he's a little bit deeper. He's not necessarily the swashbuckling number 10 that we saw sometimes when he was playing for Leipzig, or even indeed out on the right wing as he was at times for Leipzig. So you do wonder whether or not this is a situation where Szoboszlai has been going to the Slot saying, give me a go, let me see what happens. And to be honest, if you look across that lineup against Brighton, I feel like there's maybe a couple of other instances of a let me have a go, and Slot saying, okay, you prove it to me. I mentioned Dom Szoboszlai. I think the same goes for Federico Chiesa, playing through the middle, something that we've heard lots of people clamouring for, and I wouldn't be surprised if he himself believed that that was his position, or that was the best chance of him getting into the side, if you look at the way things are going for Mo Salah, and even on the other side for Diaz and for Gakpo. And also in the centre-halves, we've spoken a lot about Ibu Konate and his alleged demands to be paid as one of the top players at the club. Well, part of that is being a leader and seeing how you do without big brother Virgil there alongside you. So the opportunity to see what the central defence looks like without Virgil van Dijk, with Konate and Quansah, was another one of those, okay, show me what you got moments. And to be honest, of those three, you'd say that Szoboszlai was probably the only one who really did his case a massive boost. Slot mentioned the fact that he liked a lot of what he saw from Dom in that position. He mentioned the ball that he played to Mo that started the first goal. I do think when you are thinking of him as a potential option in that position, it's those passes that really are what give you the idea to think, maybe this could work. He did mention, though, that there is the not unsurmountable hurdle of Alexis McAllister to get through. Now, obviously, Alexis is not playing for the rest of the season. We've already spoken about him being stood down because of his own fitness issues. But to be able to be better than McAllister in that position, Dom still has a long way to go. If you think about that Brighton game and the amount of times Brighton players were able to run straight through the centre of the Liverpool midfield, that's the kind of thing that we haven't been suffering when there's been the Gravenberch-McAllister axis. So Dom's going to have to be able to get better at that if he wants to be there full time. But the other thing we need to mention is that it's interesting that there may well be a reason why the person who's been playing number 10 for Liverpool all season may suddenly want to find himself a new position. Perhaps he's aware that there may well be a brand new pretender to play in that number 10 position. Perhaps even a young fella from Germany. Who knows? Now, I'm not going to get into transfer speculation because we will be doing that later in the summer. So that's your lot in terms of this press conference review, the final one of the 24-25 season. So I want to say a few things. Thank you all for coming with me on this journey. I really hope that you've enjoyed my analysis just as much as I've enjoyed giving it to you. I have to mention as well the fact that little trailer that I mentioned a second ago is the truth. This is not going to be the last video you see from me to the start of next season. This channel isn't going to go dormant. We are going to be discussing everything that Liverpool gets up to over the summer, which of course means transfers. And who knows, I might even bring a few guests along to talk transfer with me. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see on that. But again, thank you so much for coming with me on this journey. Thank you for all your support. If you don't subscribe yet, click that button. Please subscribe. Please come along with me. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to leave comments. Don't forget to tell your friends all about it. There are other ways you can kind of find me in the interim. I'm still doing the late challenge. This week's show is up there on YouTube and the second show is available on Patreon. Honestly, trust me, you're not going to want to miss the Patreon show this week. We had a lot of fun. The new edition of the Late Challenge is going to be recorded on Tuesday because obviously there's the parade happening on Monday. In the meantime, you'll also see me on the Anfield Wrap all over the place. I'm going to be doing some gutter shows. We just did a really interesting transfer committee show that's just coming out in the next couple of days or so. And I will still be writing for This Is Anfield. There'll be a new column coming out over the course of the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. All of that still to come. Now, my final message is for anyone who is coming to the city this weekend to kind of either if you're going to be lucky enough to go to the game against Crystal Palace or you're just coming for the parade, you want to come to Liverpool to soak up the atmosphere, the ambience, to be able to breathe in the air of the champions. Be safe, be careful, enjoy yourself, and really, really remember these days because you know what? As Liverpool fans, it's been a long time coming. I'll see you next time.